Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Metro's Nada Yada Island podcast.
I almost fainted when the 4 new bombshells arrived. 4 free Samsung Galaxy A16 5G phones at Metro.
No way.
And finding out the 4th line is free? Oh, things got heated.
That's wild. Join Metro and get 4 free Samsung 5G phones. Only at Metro.
Plus tax. Bring 4 numbers and an ID and sign up for any Metro Flex plan. Not available currently at T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley Livesey from the History of the Second World War podcast. Join me on a journey through the most destructive conflict in human history, a journey that will take us not just through the famous campaigns and cataclysmic battles, but also to the lesser well-known corners of the war that touched millions all over the world, as we try and answer not just the questions of what and where, but how and why. You can find History of the Second World War on all major podcast platforms or at historyofthesecondworldwar.com.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 503, A Desperate Defense, if ever there was one. Having reached the entrance to the Crimea, General of the Cavalry Erich Hansen's 54th Army Corps, specifically the 46th and 73rd Infantry Divisions, were tasked with smashing through the Tatar Wall and the other defensive lines of the Perekop Isthmus. For beyond it was the massive peninsula, and certainly the Soviet port city of Sevastopol. Problem was, Colonel General Kuznetsov, commander of the independent 51st Army, and Admiral Oktyabrsky of the Black Sea Fleet were attempting to manifest Stalin's will by denying access. And though the struggle had been titanic, going back and forth, the Germans did manage to eventually smash their way through the first 2 defensive lines and then the Tatar Wall. Kuznetsov had no choice. He asked and was given permission to retreat to Ishun, a town about 20 miles to the south. Though losing the first few battles, the peninsula wasn't in German hands yet. But just as Hansen's 2 divisions were about to dash south and continue the fight, the Soviets of the Southwest Front attacked the Romanian troops threatening Melitopol, about 80 miles or 128 kilometers to the northeast of Crimea's entrance. This local Soviet victory was only possible as the new commander of the 11th Army, General of Infantry Erich von Manstein, had taken much from 30th Corps near Melitopol and told the rest to wait until Crimea was subdued. Then the borrowed units would be returned, so 30th Corps could continue east, on to Mariupol, and then to the industrial city of Rostov-on-Don, the administrative center of the area, and the gateway to the Baku oil fields to the south of Rostov. But now, with the Romanians attacked and pushed back, not only was this front threatened with being unraveled, if the Soviets pushed too far back, then the German 54 Army Corps trying to enter the Crimea might become cut off, even surrounded. No, this was a crisis of the first order. All other offensives in the area had to pause until this was rectified. And warning this over, General Hansen sent the SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, the SS Division, the Assault Gun Battalion 190, and most of the planes of Fliegerkorps 4 back to check the enemy near Melitopol. As those troops were on the move, obviously the fighters and bombers got there first, but during this distraction, the Stavka made its move. With the Tatar Wall lost, Kuznetsov and Oktyabrsky told the Stavka, without more men, we cannot hold. Then they attached a recommendation. As it looked as if Odessa was about to be lost, the 2 men requested that the troops there, the Independent Coastal Army, be sent to Sevastopol via the Black Sea Fleet. The Stavka grumbled, as all political entities do, but then assented. Before the first week of October was over, the Soviet 157th Rifle Division was being ferried over. Being distracted by the fighting around Melitopol, the planes of Fliegerkorps 4 did not interfere with these convoys. In fact, not until the last convoy, on October 14th, did the German planes make any attempt to stop this. But only 1 of the 11 ships that day were sunk. Odessa was about to be lost. It didn't look much better for Melitopol, but Crimea? Crimea had just been reinforced. The sacrifice of Odessa and its people, coupled with the transfer of troops, would become a thorn in the German hide somewhere else. Despite the saying, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket," that's exactly what Manstein was about to do, as simply he needed this headache near Melitopol over. Back in late September, the German 30th Army Corps and the 49th Mountain Corps were making their way towards Melitopol. They were soon joined by the 3rd Romanian Army. But with the siege of Odessa ongoing, though at the beginning of its end, the fighting in Crimea and the constant attacks by the Soviet 9th and 18th Armies, though while retreating, the Romanians were definitely the weak link, respectively. And that's where the Soviets struck. Soon the Romanians, despite being under German command, started retreating. This caused the German units alongside them to halt, as to continue would only open them up to flanking attacks. The Soviets had been outflanked numerous times since June 22nd and appreciated how much of a stopping measure this truly was. And that's why they did it. However, in reaction, that's when Manstein ordered the SS Division, his only mobile division, to rush to the aid of the fighting there. Given the state of the two Soviet divisions, the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler had little trouble in bucking up the Romanians. But during this, the 1st Panzer Army was also building up their forces just to the north of this fighting. And once the Soviet counterattack was halted and the 1st Panzer was ready, on October 1st, the Axis relaunched their attack. The 1st Panzer swung around the Soviets' northern flank, while the SS Division, the Romanians, and the 30th and 49th Mountain Corps all came right at the Soviets from the west. Big historical events are like investing goals. A little here, a little there. It adds up. Then something big happens. That's whatever your investing goals are. And that's Acorn's approach. Use your spare change to start investing for your future. And you can earn bonus investments just for buying what you need from brands you love. I've been using Acorns for the last 5 years, and I'm happy. I needed 5 minutes to set it up, and now my future is that much less stressful. After all, a new year is here, so use that as a marker to start something new for you. Again, I have a regular account, a retirement account, and something set up for my 2 youngest daughters. So, to sum up, Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You do not need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns let you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5 or even just your spare change. Again, I've been using this for 5 years and I'm happy, and I genuinely want you to give it a try. Head to acorns.com/WW2 or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/WW2. Collectively, this was simply too much for the 9th and 18th Soviet armies. Besides their exhaustion, reduced numbers, and lack of equipment, being on the retreat as they were since the Dnieper River, the Soviet forces fell back on October 3rd. And though it is possible to deliver up casualties during a retreat, much like the Germans would do in a few years' time on the Eastern Front, that was beyond the capabilities of the 2 Soviet armies. The retreat became a rout, then became a complete breakdown in organization. Those parts of the German 11th Army on the scene took up the chase, while the SS Division destroyed the enemy's 30th Rifle Division's headquarters section, meaning now there were even fewer officers to give orders or to even try to control the situation. The result? Melitopol was captured 2 days later, on October 5th, by the 3rd Panzer Corps, and leapfrogging the 3rd Panzer, the SS Leibstandarte drove hard east and then occupied the city of Berdyansk, about 75 miles or 120 kilometers further east along the coast of the Sea of Azov on October 6th. As the Soviet forces were being ordered by the Stavka, not to mention they did not want to be captured, they kept fighting. Indeed, as the Germans moved east, they continued to come into contact with additional enemy forces, which allowed the SS Division, soon joined by the 14th Motorized Army Corps, to surround 7 Red Army divisions in total. This was in the area between Berdyansk and Mariupol, located about 40 miles or 64 kilometers further east along the coast. The encirclement was complete by October 7th, and 4 days later, that was it. The Russians were unable to defend themselves or fight back. The speed and ferocity of the panzers, certainly of the SS division, made sure of that, which was the point of the SS divisions in the first place. All the technology Nazi Germany had to offer, coupled with the heartlessness of the fanatic ideology of the Schutzstaffel. By the time of the surrender, there were now under German control the surviving 106,332 troops of the 9th and 18th Armies, along with 212 tanks and 772 guns, all kinds, captured. It was these very kinds of results that blitzkrieg tactics provided that had first caused Hitler to hope the war in the East would be over by Christmas. And to be sure, the first 5.5 months had delivered as promised. But between the sheer distances, Russia's population of military-aged men, and Stalin's refusal to quit, not to mention his organizational skills, after the initial panic attack, of course, it seemed possible that the blitzkrieg had met its match, though it was far too soon to be certain of that. Either way, the threat to the north of the Crimea was over. It was time to get back to taking the peninsula, while other forces continued to drive on to Rostov. And back to the Crimea, Kuznetsov had the 51st Army of about 50,000 men, but some of them had to be left to guard the Chonga Peninsula, as well as the Sivash along the east coast. Though neither one of those was a continuous land bridge, it would have been possible for the enemy to try something at either location. Hence, prudence demanded a stationing of troops. This left Kuznetsov with between 15 and 20,000 men to form up his new defensive line at Ishun. But what also kept Kuznetsov up at night was that his best men, the troops of Bentov's 9th Rifle Corps, had already been lost up north at Perekop. To compensate, the admiral sent Kuznetsov 2 battalions of naval infantrymen, like the ones who had fought so bravely at Odessa, along with the 157th Rifle Division. This was a welcome augmentation, but Kuznetsov was short on artillery, and thus far and in the future, this would be generally a Soviet strength. To make up for this, the Stavka sent Kuznetsov a squadron of the latest Yak-1 fighters to join the already engaging 32nd Fighter Regiment. The Yak-1 was designed by Alexander Yakovlev, and some 43,000 of these planes, in various formations, would be built during the war. Like many fighter designers, Yakovlev had been building sports aircraft before the war. This gave the designer a lead when contracts were being fought over. In 1940, the Yak-1 had problems during testing, like its weight and oil overheating, but as the other fighters also had issues, Stalin went with the Yak-1. And of course, when Barbarossa was launched, Moscow had to pick something to begin mass production. The Yak-1, it was going to be. Many experts believe that the Yak-1, as touching overall quality, comes in between the Bf-109E and the Bf-109F. The Soviet and German planes were that close, and as usual in these cases, it came down to the pilot and/or the situation. In the end, once over 16,000 feet, or 5,000 meters, the Yak was more maneuverable. Once the German pilots figured this out, they made sure to stay below this threshold. And due to their own experiences, the Soviets were big proponents of having the guns of the fighter behind the propeller versus in the wing, Indeed, when they started receiving fighters from the U.S., like the Bell P-39 Airacobras, the first thing they did was remove the wing guns. This made them lighter, improved roll rates, and according to Soviet pilots, made the guns more accurate. As with all fighters, the future Yaks would be improvements, of course. But for now, this is what the 32nd Fighter Squadron had to work with, and one of their main tasks was to act as airborne artillery.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
As the Soviet 51st Army retreated to Ishun, enemy scouts were not far behind, and what they had to report back to Hansen probably produced a groan on his part. Ishun is at the southern end of the Perekop Peninsula, but as the land is broken up by marshes and at least 4 lakes, the land approaches to Ishun are no more than dirt bridges or fingers, and the widest one, on a direct path, was no more than 1,400 yards wide. Approaching Ishun might not be the hell that the 3 defensive lines to the north were, but it was their own version of hell, and they would have to be fought through. As had been the fighting to the north, there would be no flanking movements here. Rather, a direct head-on slog it would have to be. Worse, it was again, like in the north, open territory, nothing to hide behind, and the marshy terrain meant bringing forward heavy guns, or anything heavy, would be a challenge. Kuznetsov guessed the Germans, in their impatience, would come straight on, so he put his trusty 361st Rifle Regiment, a rifle battalion of the 172nd Rifle Division, and the 2 recently arrived naval infantry battalions on the widest and most direct path, this being between the west coastline and Lake Stara. On the right or eastern side of Lake Staro was Lake Krasno, and in between them was the next finger of land. Here, Kuznetsov put the rest of the experienced 156th Rifle Division. Located here was a bromide factory used for flame retardation, and like the fighting up north, it was seen as and used as a strong defensive position. To the right of this, Kuznetsov put his 106th and 271st Rifle Divisions, specifically between Lake Krasno and the Sivash. But again, given the marshy terrain, this would seem an unlikely avenue of advance. But time would show that Kuznetsov would deploy too many forces on his right. The thinking is he was probably subconsciously reacting to the fighting that had occurred during the Civil War, when Red forces here had been outflanked. But again, Manstein would be a more wily opponent. As for assessing his weapons, Kuznetsov was happy to still have 9 of his original 10 T-34 tanks, along with the 5th Tank Regiment. Yet again, his artillery was his weak link, mostly having older 76mm howitzers. To compensate, several armored trains were being thrown together, and thrown together is an apt description. They would be ugly, but effective. On the other side of this chessboard, Manstein, following the quick victory during the Battle of the Sea of Azov, got his way with the OKH. He told them having the 11th Army take the Crimea while another part of it fought elsewhere, that was simply too much. Thus Berlin said, after agreeing, that the whole of the 11th Army would be together to take Crimea, and that General Oberst Ewald von Kleist and his Panzer Group I would make for Rostov. But, having given Manstein what he wanted, the OKH then took from him with its other hand. He was stripped of the 49th Mountain Corps and the SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division. This left Manstein with only 6 infantry divisions, yet he was expected to still achieve success. Some things never change, A controlling entity gives a person a goal and then takes from them the projected means to achieve it. As this was the case, Manstein would wait until all of his divisions were with him, as they were currently scattered around the area. By mid-October, the remaining elements of the 11th Army started to arrive. As Manstein looked over his maps to produce a winning attack plan, he winced at the lack of cover. Surely the enemy would cover the approaches, but would probably put their strongest force on the direct path, close to the coast. The leader of the 11th Army might not be able to pull a bait-and-switch or a believable diversion, which is a tried-and-true tactic, but he could do the next best thing. The general would launch attacks at all three avenues and then support the one that got through. Postscript. Going back to Kuznetsov's air arm, when this clash started, the Russians actually enjoyed local air superiority. Not that it would stay this way, for two reasons. First, additional fighter wings would arrive to make up for removing the SS division, and second, the Soviet air arm would be destroyed in a matter of days. During 2 days of fighting, the Luftwaffe destroyed 33 defending fighters for the cost of one lost German fighter. And then, from October 18th to the 24th, the Soviets lost another 140 aircraft. This allowed the Germans to use their other planes, like the Junkers, to focus on ground troops and defensive positions. For all the hopes, if not dreams, of the Stavka and Kuznetsov of another holdout like Kiev or Odessa, Crimea would not follow suit. Mostly. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So those of you on the East Coast like me, I hope you enjoyed the snow. We went out this morning and had a great time, except for when the dog would chase us and bite us because we are obviously his toys. He does whatever he wants. Anyways, so I'd like to say welcome aboard to the latest members. First, there's Anne McGo. I think that's how it's pronounced. Anne, if I got it wrong, I apologize. Then Michael Spradlin and James Griffith. Now, all of these people, when they signed up for membership, they paid on Stripe. That's something that Paul put together for me. So if your hesitancy is using PayPal, you have another option because Stripe is now set up. So anyway, welcome aboard to those three members. And as far as donations, let's see here. Jeff Dempsey, Dick Duncan, and Joe Whitfield. So thank you very much for the donations. It is greatly appreciated. So we're seeing the battle take shape. Unfortunately for the Russians, it's not going to go very well, and it's not going to take too long. Having said that, there are going to be parts of the Crimea that hold out for the duration. So we'll cover that, and then we'll jump back. But I just want to show how this one falls. And again, the enormous, the complex, the multi-layered task the Stavka had in trying to defend this vast area with their limited forces. Again, more are coming online, and then as soon as they do, they have to decide where to put them, which of course requires going through Stalin, which of course requires going through what is the greatest need at the time. So again, it's a very complex thing. It's a lot of moving parts all at the same time with a dictator over your head, no less, which I find completely fascinating. But again, that was the issues and what they were dealing with. So we'll see how this unfolds. We're not going to go through all of the Crimea. I'm just going to show how it gets lost, and then we'll jump to another theater and maybe Rostov or something like that. But this won't take long because it didn't take the Germans long. Take care, everyone.
I'm Dr. Samuel Hume, and I'm here to tell you about my new podcast, Winds of Change. Winds of Change is the story of how the sun set on the British Empire. This first season is on British India, and in these weekly episodes, we'll cover the whole history through to the final days of the Raj in 1947. If you love learning about the past and discovering why the world is the way it is, then listen to Winds of Change. You can listen to Winds of Change on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere you find great podcasts.